All right, I wanted to give you a real quick video here talking about some of the topics in the employee version 3. All right, so I want to rehash a couple of things. One here, I just took a screenshot of my form, and yeah, it doesn't have the GUID and other stuff on there that it asks you to do from version 2, but it just should give you an idea here. Keep in mind now, remember, we got a list called all employees, okay? And actually, I can pull my code over here a little bit just to show you. So what we got here, we've got this list all employees. What is it? It's a list of the employee class. And remember, the employee class was just this thing that contains basically a container that holds all the information: employee ID, first name ID, etc. So just wanted to point out, here's our list of variables. Each one of these blue boxes represents an employee class, and the information from these is pulled and displayed up here. A couple of other variables that are important: list index. That's what we're going to use anytime. What's the current one? That's going to say, am I pointing to this one? So that's what's displayed up here. Do I point to the last one? That's displayed up here. Lower limits, we can't go below 0. That helps control our next. Upper limits is the highest number of elements. So in this case, I get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's going to return, say there's 5 elements in here. That's my upper limit. I can't go to the 6th employee. It doesn't exist. All right, so hopefully that's not confusing. So now let's talk about how are we going to go ahead and create a new employee. So a couple things here first. Let's go ahead and pin this so this moves down. So what are we going to have? You're going to need to add on here somewhere. Let's get my thing over here. Probably right up here, like an add employee. Boy, I can't really write too well. But you're going to have a button here that's going to say add employees. You're going to add a menu strip up here. Let me increase the size of this, maybe to here. Okay. And so then again, so we're going to have add an option up here. So that option is going to be added. So what's that going to do? So then I'm just going to copy this quick. So what I would like you to do is you're going to create another form over here that it's going to pop up a new form. And now you can look at the code and how we popped up the new form for the GUID viewer, things like that, or the search utility would show you. So you're going to create another form. So you go in Visual Studio, create another form. You can use this as a copy, but if 3 other things will be on here: employee ID. You can have a GUID on here, but don't worry about filling it in. Other things that you're going to have here, I mean, you're not going to have, let's switch over to the red pencil. Since I just copied this over here, I mean, you're not going to have these buttons, but you are going to have a button that probably says add. Okay? So a button here, that's whenever we're doing adding. So the person's going to come in, fill in all the information, phone number. You can use mask if you want to, the mask input to make sure the phone number is put in right. But that's the first part of this. Go ahead and set up your form to just collect the information. Okay, and again, I said there'd be a button down here. You also could be up here and say, okay, I'm going to have an add button on a menu strip. Boy, I really can't write today, but I think you get the idea. I might as well just give up. Add. Okay, so you're going to add a button on there if you wanted to. Now, the question is, where do I store this? So when that button gets hit, so remember our action events. It has an actual action. It has a trigger. And it has the actual method that's going to run. So the trigger is going to be this. Whenever they hit the add button up here or down here, wherever you want to do it, that's going to trigger an action within this that's going to call a method over here called add employee. Okay, or whatever you want to call it. All right. So this is the part where most people are getting confused. What do I do at this stage? How do I go about this? So let me see if it's possible to clear my screen here. I don't know that it is. And that's kind of the problem with drawing within Microsoft here, but that's fine. So the add button. So how would I say to fix this? What's a good approach for this? Let's switch to, that looks like some type of crazy color. What is that? Pen Galaxy. What is this? Just give me a black pencil, or give me a different color. Here we go. So let's kind of do a blue. So what I would say when they hit the add button over here, create yourself, if I can get my mouse to come over here, in this method you're going to create yourself a variable that is of in type employee. Okay? Type employee, which means it's going to have first name, last name, all that stuff information. And when they hit add, you're going to pull out the text field in here, stick it in this employee variable you just created. Pull out the last name, stick it in there. So this then becomes filled up, just like one of these blue boxes over here, but it's not part of this yet. One of the blue boxes over here gets filled up. It's just a separate one with this. Now, when the trigger is picked up, this entire thing here is passed back to this method, so passed back to this employee ID method. So this is kind of the idea of how it's going to work. And we can go ahead and I can talk through the mechanics here maybe when we get in person, so that this employee record can now be added to the end of all employees. Once it's part of all employees, then there's a few things we have to adjust over here, but for the moment. So before we meet in person, I want you to have this form created. You need to have this form created and ready to go. So I have an add button over here and this form pops up. If that's all you have, that's perfect. If you could go further than to have at least an add button that creates an employee variable and fills it in with the content off of here, that would be great. The hard part then I can work with you on is how to create this action event. How do we set up the trigger? How do we set up the method? How do we pass it back over here and add it on here? But before we meet, at least have a form ready to go. Have an add button on there. And if you could, have an add button that creates an employee variable and fills it in with the content in each one of these fields. If you can have that, that will get us miles ready to go, and then we can just talk about how do I take the data from this form, pass it back over to this form, add it into the list, and then how do I display it on here. So this action event right here, this is the hard part. This is where people get confused. So again, get a form created and we can go from there.